Thank you very much, Tara. Distinguished guests, stakeholders in the Irish agri-food industry, ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to be here this morning with Tara for the conference that you're having and for the presentation of the results of the Brexit Barometer. The Irish agri-food industry is our biggest indigenous industry, employing, as you know, between small, medium, micro and indeed the big international players, almost 180,000 people in the country. Our biggest indigenous industry, and one that has been to the forefront in the context of our economic redevelopment. So Brexit is a big issue in the context of the ambition of that industry, and I'm going to come to Brexit specifically later. But the ambition of that food industry is encapsulated in the document Foodwise 2025, which talks about by that period, growing our exports to 19 billion, creating 23,000 additional jobs in doing so. So, there has been commentary to the effect that in some way, because of these challenges, Brexit and others, and I'll deal with the others as well, that we should in some way dismantle our ambition. And I think, on the contrary, it was never more important that we have a blueprint that kind of shows what the stated ambition is, and that we benchmark our progress in terms of implementing that report, which deals with kind of all of the critical issues in terms of sustainability, in terms of human resources, etc., that we benchmark our progress. And if we navigate and formulate policies to meet all of the challenges, let's see where we end up, but let's identify the challenges along the road. And I think for that reason, having a report like that is really, really important, containing our ambition, and that we, assess where we're at any particular given time. Yesterday, for example, I had a meeting of the High-Level Implementation Committee, and that happens on a regular basis within the department every month or 6 weeks, and we see how we're progressing in various sectors of that document. And, where there are issues that need to be addressed, we engage with stakeholders, semi-state agencies, state bodies, the department, industry, to see what we can do to kind of move it on. And I think that's really, really important, because there will always be headwinds. And I suppose, we've mentioned Brexit, and I'll come back to that, but there are other significant headwinds out there as well. And one of the, key aspects of Foodwise is environmental sustainability. And that is really, really important in the context of the industry, moving up the value-added chain as much as possible, and ensuring, because we move up, that we insulate ourselves to the maximum degree possible from the vagaries in the marketplace. The higher up you are the value-added chain, the better chance you have of navigating those challenges. So climate change, the environment, the new common agricultural policy are all interlinked in terms of how we meet that challenge. But it is a very significant challenge. And it's a challenge that no sector of the economy can get a pass on. And though we have good sustainability credentials, particularly in the dairy industry, where globally we're on a par with the best in the world, ourselves in New Zealand, our future ambition in that area, cannot be exempted from the national endeavour to improve our sustainability credentials. And across all sectors. And of course, we have been doing things. If you take in the beef sector, we're investing 300 million euros in the current rural development programme on beef data and genomics. Our GLAS scheme, contributing to public goods in terms of water quality, biodiversity. All of those things are laying a very solid foundation upon which we have to build. And as I said, no sector, beef, dairy, sheep, tillage, no sector is exempt from the endeavour to improve our sustainability credentials. And that's a significant headwind, and I'm satisfied, that across a whole of government support approach, as well as across the entire agri-food industry, there's a recognition that it's an issue, and a recognition that collectively we need to do more. And we had, only last week, the sustainability workshop organised by Tagarsk, and I think, where you had all of the stakeholders, including the NGOs and the environmental NGOs, and they have a role to play also, honestly facing up to what the issues are. And I think, because of that, we can make progress on that, and avoid the punitive fines that will be imposed on us if we don't. I mean, the other headwinds that we face are in the area of international trade. If you look across the pond towards America, you have the Trump administration now, which is talking, about trade wars, about sanctions. And the US is a very significant market for us, worth in the region of €1 billion per annum now. And, we are a globalized economy. We live or die by trade agreements, and trade wars are really not what we want. So that's a significant concern for us. And if you look closer to home within the Eurozone area, from a period of relative calm just a number of weeks ago, we now have a situation where you have a new government in Spain with a minority government. Some have termed it the Frankenstein coalition, where increased political stability is probably the least damaging thing you could say about it. You've seen a new government in Italy. We've seen issues with the German coalition, the migration crisis, and all of a sudden, what looked particularly stable politically after navigating a number of electoral challenges across Europe is now quite unstable again. So that makes, I think, it all the more important to look at the summer economic statement that the government published this week and to see where we're at in terms of this economy meeting those challenges. And I think what the summer economic statement tried to state was, in light of all of that, and in light of what we've just come through, it was never more important that we are prudent with the public finances. And in the budget that is forthcoming, whereas we will increase expenditure significantly, we do not propose to avail of the latitude that's available within the fiscal rules to borrow up to the limits permitted therein. We believe that there is significant investment required in infrastructure, and there is proposals to significantly increase capital investment. But we would like also, as a government, we pride ourselves as a low tax economy, but we are a significant outlier in one particular area of taxation, and that's in the area of personal taxation. And people hitting the top rate of tax at a €34,000 per annum salary is something that is no longer sustainable in the context of the competition that we face. And that's something in the context of the limited space that we have to manoeuvre that we would like to see addressed in the context of the budget. But it is critical, I think, in the context of the overall headwinds that we face as a really globalized economy, that we are prudent with the public finances. And I think that's the message that we want to send out above all else in the context of the summer economic statement. Coming to the subject that we're here, I suppose, this morning about in the context of the Brexit Barometer, it's now almost 2 years since the UK voted to leave the European Union. And, even prior to that, we had been engaged as an industry, as the department and the agencies within the department's remit in looking at what the possible consequences would be of Brexit. And that preparation has accelerated significantly over the last 2 years. And we've had a number of initiatives in terms of additional resources here to Bord Bia, additional resources to Enterprise Ireland, investment in prepared consumer foods, innovation in the Meat Technology Centre, innovation down in Moore Park on the dairy side, the €300 million loan fund, the €150 million loan fund to the farming community, all aimed at trying to assist the industry to navigate the many challenges that it faces. But I suppose really what people want to know is, where are we at today? What progress have we made? And we can continue to engage at all levels. I mean, only in the last week I was in the United Kingdom meeting with Michael Gove, who's my political counterpart there. Continued serious bilateral level engagement with all of our EU partners. And I do expect today, in the context of the visit by the President of the Commission, Mr. Juncker, and Michel Barnier, that what we will see emerge from today is a confirmation of the rock-solid solidarity across the EU 27 with the position of Ireland in the context of these negotiations. These are not bilateral negotiations between Ireland and the UK. It is recognised across the EU 27 that we are the most financially exposed, and a particular recognition in the context of agreements that were entered into with the sovereign UK government in December and reaffirmed in March about the all-island economy, and call it a protocol, call it a backstop, that we would not have the emergence of a hard border on the island of Ireland. Regrettably, we haven't had the kind of engagement necessary from the UK government to give legal effect to that. And I think that will be made clear in the communications today by the President of the Commission when he addresses the Dáil. but that, you know, there will be a clear statement also that we cannot proceed to negotiating or conceding on a transition agreement until full legal effect is given to what the UK government signed up to as a sovereign government engaged in bilateral negotiations with the European Union in December and again in March. And it is regrettable that we're in this situation now, because we took in good faith that agreement that was entered into. And it is true that we are preparing for all scenarios, and that's right and proper and prudent. You know, insofar as there was engagement by the United Kingdom and the most recent publication on customs arrangements, for example, in Northern Ireland, it didn't deal at all with the single biggest issue that, of concern to the agri-food industry, and that's in the whole area of regulatory alignment. It also timelined their commitment to a no hard border, and neither of those are acceptable in the context of getting to a workable solution. So we are, as a government, across the whole of government and certainly within the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine, looking at the granular detail now about what would be necessary in a worst case scenario, whilst absolutely committed to making sure that we get the best possible deal, and hopefully one that avoids the necessity to go down that route. But it is right and proper that we would be preparing for all possible scenarios. And we, as I said, we're looking at all of that in some granular detail now, because that's the right and proper and prudent thing. The clock is ticking. I mean, if you look at the roadmap that is there, the October Council was the council at which all of this was to have been signed up. The UK leaves at the end of March. The transition agreement was to commence thereafter. But there can be no agreement on transition until there is a full legal effect given to the withdrawal agreement and the commitments in December last. And that hasn't happened. As I said, I do expect confirmation today that that solidarity across the EU 27 remains rock solid. And that's really important to us. But we will continue, I assure you, to make every endeavour to get the best possible trading relationship with the United Kingdom, as close as possible to the status quo. An awful lot of the UK energy is being spent presently within an internal debate, internal within the UK Cabinet, internal within the Conservative Party, internal to the House of Commons, and indeed the House of Lords. And I'm sure all of you who have an interest in this are almost watching on a daily basis to what's happening in that context. We need more engagement bilaterally between the UK government and the European Union to progress these issues in detail. And whilst it's not late yet, we are significantly beyond where we, in terms of time, where we need to be in terms of progress on these matters. But just to assure you that, you know, in the context of all of those headwinds, the government, you know, is fully focused on what it needs to do to navigate all of these challenges. Brexit in particular, but also all of the other ones in terms of maintaining prudence in our public finances, which is critical to being able to ride out any of these storms which might, you know, erupt or get significantly worse than they currently are. Prudence in our public finances is critical, and the lessons of the last crash are really important. And coming back to the first point which I made, the sustainability challenge. That's kind of, ladies and gentlemen, an overview as from the Department of Agriculture, but also to an extent from the whole of government point of view, which engages in all these matters. I'm delighted to be here for, you know, the launch of the Brexit Barometer. It is critically important that the industry at individual company level engages and prepares. And I know for small and micro enterprises who have some exposure to the UK market in particular, that's not as easy as it is for the bigger players. But it is nonetheless critical to prepare. As a famous Corkman once said, you know, fail to prepare. I think this was even in the context of a World Cup once. Fail to prepare, prepare to fail. I refer, of course, to Roy Keane. And I think that maxim applies to the food industry as well, and indeed to all of the industry, because, you know, we are the most exposed in terms of the UK market in our agri-food sector, though as an overall percentage of our trade reducing. Geography will always hopefully be a determinant of where we trade. The UK should always be, and I hope will always be, a really important market. It's one that we understand best. We have close cultural relationships with, long endeavour over many, many years by many companies here and elsewhere in building up that relationship, in securing supermarket shelf space. We're not going to walk away from that without a fight, and I assure you that in terms of this department, this ministry and the whole of government, we're well up for that fight. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.